Next Tuesday, March 26th at 2 p.m. with Mike Owens, the creator of Danger and Eggs from Amazon Prime. And he's also the winner of the Emmy Award from 2018 for Outstanding Directing in an Animated Program. So tune into that. So you're listening to the Ambassador Good Time Ear Tango Radio Hour from Burbank, California, playing on Woo Radio. That's Woodbury EDU, own Woo Radio. And this is our special live from London episode with story artist, layout artist, 2D character animator, effects animator, and concept artists. Please welcome the very talented Aya Suzuki. Here she is.
Hello, everybody.
Hello from London. Yeah.
Hello from London.
All right.
So it's 9 p.m. over here, and then it's just about lunch over.
Yeah, we're at 2:11 right now. So
okay, then.
And we're getting people from Costa Rica. There's people. I'll just go through. It's exciting. Canada is popping up. So, Italy. Oh my God, India. Oh, there's so many people popping up.
Wow.
Great. You have a lot of fans, Aya.
I'm not sure if they're fans, but I'm really grateful that they're tuning in. This is brilliant. Yeah, I love the fact that there's a lot of people abroad, basically. Tuning in. That's fantastic.
Yeah. Well, actually, you're calling from the future. You're at 9 p.m. there. And
yes.
Yeah. So I found you on Facebook, and because you were posting all these great animation posts that showed your animation as a pencil test, and then it would dissolve into the live, the final version. Mm-hmm. And so I reached out to her and I said, "Would you like to be on the show?" And had to show her some examples of what this show is. So you were born in Japan and raised in England? Is that right?
So I am born in Japan, but I was raised mainly in half and half between Japan and the UK. But I also did a little bit of high school in Illinois, actually, in the US. So yeah.
Where in Illinois?
In a small place called Glenview.
So when was the first time that you discovered that there was something called animation? Do you remember that?
I was so young, to be honest. I don't really recall. It's just that sporadic memories I do have. So when I was a child living in the UK, I think the UK, especially, we have a private channel called Channel 4.
Oh, yes.
At some point, they were showing quite a lot of experimental animated shorts. And so I used to watch them, but they weren't really, childish cartoons that they were showing. They were showing, I recall watching Yuri Norstein's stuff. It's a Russian director who did Hedgehog in the Fog and stuff like that. And very artistically beautiful pieces, very charming. And also, in the UK at that time, there was a lot of animation production happening as well. So Watership Down had quite an impact on me.
Yeah, that was a great movie. I remember seeing that as a kid. We didn't know what it was here. We thought it was about, bunny rabbits, and it'd be a fun,
little rabbits.
Yeah, singing songs and, adventures and things. And then we saw blood.
One by one, they started suffering and dying. But I just remember I was never traumatized. I was always, it got me emotional.
Oh yeah, that was a great movie.
That was what it was intending to do at the end of the day. So I kind of recall those moments, and I just remember them throughout my life. I forgot the titles, and then when I went into studying animation, I kind of rediscovered them again and found out who the directors and creators were. But anyway, so that was my experience in the UK. And then I was a child who couldn't speak Japanese very well
Mm.
because at a young age, I moved to the UK, and my Japanese, I mean, as a young child, you don't differentiate languages that much. It's all muddled up, isn't it? And that
Mm-hmm.
was when I was like, 4 or 5 or so. And whenever my we used to go back as a family back to Japan once a year because grandparents or cousins were there. But then what happened was that I'd be sitting with family and friends, and the family will be, well, what do we do with this kid who can't quite speak Japanese?
Mm.
So they would just slap on a VHS at that time, and it would be a Miyazaki film.
Mm.
And then I just sit down and watch it, and then they don't have to deal with the difficulties of not being able to communicate with me. So that was my introduction to Totoro and Kiki. And the funny thing is, even though I wasn't very my language, my Japanese was very weak, I still completely understood it and was totally absorbed with it. So that was my introduction to Miyazaki's, the Japanese side.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so that was that's how I remember animation as a child. And my introduction to Disney was like that I remember very strongly is going to see Fantasia. I think my parents took me to the cinema because they used
Mm.
to Fantasia quite a lot at the cinema, and then I remember going to see that and that having a huge impact on me.
So you're a kid. Did you draw as a kid and kind of get into it?
Oh yeah,
Yeah,
yeah. I was always drawing,
always drawing.
and it's one of those. When you're at school, there's always one kid who's good at drawing.
Mm-hmm.
There's just that one kid, and I was that one kid
Uh-huh.
who liked to draw, and everybody asks you to draw, and then everybody likes it, and then you get a bit cocky, and then you continue drawing, and then what do you know, that ends up being your career.
Right, exactly. So, so you went to university. So, see, I'm going to start acting. I'm going to start talking. Is London lie? You went to university for animation.
I studied at Bournemouth. At that time, it was called the Arts Institute of Bournemouth, and then the name changed, and now I don't know what it is.
Oh, okay.
It had a very strong 2D program, 2D animation program. It does training 3D as well, but the main focus was at that time. It's no longer like that anymore. 2D animation. So I went and studied there.
And you made a film, or someone else made a film called Wooden Island?
Oh wow, you
Yeah.
found that.
Yeah.
So that made a graduation film with a friend. So to be honest, I wasn't I guess I wasn't confident enough to direct and make a whole film. And my idea was I'd rather just team up with somebody and make a better film. If anything,
Mm-hmm.
you got two people working on a film, well, that's going to make a better film than one person trying to make. So so Monica Gallup, who's a very talented she's become more of a fine artist now.
Mm-hmm.
She does a lot of experimental animation herself now, and she's quite successful with it. So I teamed up with her and made a graduation film, which was like from our year. It was probably, it did well. I think it was one of the most successful films of our year because it was the one that got nominated and for awards and
Mm-hmm.
traveled quite far. So yeah.
So, I mean, looking at that early film, I mean, you can see a lot of the staging and timing and all those, animation principles in there that are really done very well for a student film. Um,
hmm
and I was just wondering, do you use some sort of reference footage when to study from? Because some of your timing is just, and when you move a character, it's very precise. Do you have some sort of process that you do for that?
Um, I think most of the time when I animate something, I am researching Like YouTube is the greatest invention for animators ever. You don't have to leave your desk in order to find reference now. So I crawl a lot on YouTube, and I look at other animation a lot as well, just to see how, not to copy it, but to see. Most of the time I look at other people's animation to see what tricks they're using. And I think, what can I steal from this? Because animation is all about trickery, I think. So in terms of acting reference, most of the time it's live action, but in order to make it an animation and use tricks, I'll reference other animated films. So all that watching a lot of animation as a kid and a teenager paid off now, because I now have a database in my brain where I just remember so much. I was I was animation directing on a series for Disney, and I remember the director would always come to me saying, "Aya, think like this scene has anything been done like this before?" And I'll be like, "Yep, go to watch this series, episode something, round about the 15-minute mark, you'll find it." And then eventually, in meetings, I'll be like, "Oh, how do we do this sequence?" So I was just like, "Oh, YouTube this," and then you'll find the reference. And it was like, my director and my art director would say, like, "How do you know all this? How is it this is all you remember, all this?" And I was like, well, I never tried to remember it. It just stuck with me, just like Watership Down and Hedgehog in the Fog and Fantasia and Totoro. They all stuck with me. I never memorized it or studied it. I just remember thinking that looks so cool, and I just remembered it because it was a joy. So strangely enough, geeking out like mad and watching all those paid off. Now I'm making a career out of it. When you're a teenager, you've got all the time in the world. I don't know why.
Yeah.
The days seem longer. So I used to watch so much. So I don't watch as much these days because the life of the politics of adulthood, let's put it that way, gets in the way, and you end up spending your time thinking you need to do more practical things. But I do still try to watch as much as possible. Actually, being on an animated film is your biggest excuse to watch a whole load of animated movies or movies that are relevant to your movie that you're working on. So when I was on Sherlock Gnomes, which I know is not the greatest movie, but I had a great time working on it as a story artist. I literally just watched every single Sherlock movie that you could possibly find, and animated versions of Sherlock. And also I read all of Conan Doyle's Sherlock books.
Wow.
And you can also find Conan Doyle's notes that like ideas that never actually got into he never actually got to write. So being on a movie sometimes is the greatest excuse to dig in even more and watch more animated films or live action films.
Right.
And read more books.
Yeah.
Enough.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, what was your first animation job that you got out of school?
So,
or university?
Straight out of school, I went to work on The Illusionist for Sylvain Chomet. So that was my first job, and so I spent 2 years more or less storyboarding. We also did some animation tests during that time, and character designs and so on. And then, I ended up on that film for 4 years.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
Yeah, so I actually got the job before I finished Wooden Island, my graduation film. And I remember whilst I was a student, I was asked to do a test for The Illusionist. And if you watch my graduation film, the animation is pretty, tight.
Mm-hmm.
It's very slow, so there was a lot of drawing accurate angles and lines, and that kind of, ended up prepping me, strangely enough, for that animation test for The Illusionist. And I just had such a steady line and ability to sort of and accuracy that, the director, Sylvain, he just said, yep, you're fine. You can come on board this film.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
You worked on Illusionist. You worked on The Dreaming Machine. You worked on Wolf Children. You worked on something called Anime Mirai. Is it
Mirai.
Mirai?
So that's
Yeah.
That's a kind of 4 films as one, and I worked on one film which was called Death Billiards.
Right.
Which eventually made it into a TV series called Death Parade.
Oh, okay. And then if you go to your Aya's site or Animation Educated, you'll see I put that up there as well. But it's really interesting because there's a lot of camera movement, and it's really amazing to watch. Even when it's like in rough form, and then when it's in final. You also worked on The Wind Rises. But you were not credited in that.
No.
And then there's something called Bayonetta.
Bayonetta. Which is a game.
Oh, okay. Yeah. And then you worked a little bit on, you have a clip of The Prophet in there in 2014. And you do all this like serious, very realistic, really down to earth, amazing animation like that. And then it's nice to see you switch over to Simon's Cat, which is it's really fun to watch as well. Then you've got Make Them Giants. I'm not sure what that was.
That's a commercial that we did for the Rugby World Cup in the UK.
Okay.
And it was sponsored by O2, the kind of mobile company. And then, it was just a very high budget commercial, basically.
Yeah, that's another one where you're moving the camera and your characters almost look like 3D and moving all around, which is really nice. You worked on Ethel and Ernest in 2016, Sherlock Gnomes 2018, and you also worked on Isle of Dogs, which how was that? I mean, that's where everything is like very stop, I bet you that drove you a little crazy.
Typical Wes. So I was approached by Wes's team saying that we need 2D animators. We have 2D scenes in this film. I was like, okay. So, and at that time I was working on Sherlock as a story artist, and I was really, really getting into story. And to be honest, I wanted to go on to another job, which was offering story. However, I thought to myself, well, this is a great opportunity to go in as an animator, but just literally learn as much as I can from Wes, actually work with him, and then learn his skills and techniques in storytelling, because I think that his style is particularly unique. And I wanted to steal it, basically. that's as a story artist, I was like, if I can, you think you really understand Wes's style just by simply watching it, but actually trying to tell a story with the way the cameras that he uses it's not as easy as trying to copy it and watching the movie. I think it's once you're in there, it's much better because you have a better insight of everything. So, but of course, I knew that Isle of Dogs was a legacy project, and it's always nice to work on a legacy project,
right?
Because people like it, they remember it.
Zachary writes in. He says, "What are the most noticeable differences between working on European and Western and Japanese animation?"
Okay, so I think the major difference I would say always, and this defines everything, with is the budget,
Mm.
the money. I have worked on Hollywood films which are budgeted more than $200 million, and I have worked on feature films in Japan which just about had $1 million,
Mm.
in budget for a whole feature film. So the money is different. And so, therefore, what happens is that when you're tight with budget, this completely changes kind of the structure of how you can make a movie. So in Japan, the teams are very small. The schedules are very tight. The movies are made, if it's got more than a year, that is a luxury schedule. A lot of the times, like, let's say a Naruto movie, a Dragon Ball movie, those TV series adaptations, movies, a lot of the times they get less than a year to make it.
Mm.
So it's tight. But that's what the budget is only allowing. When I say the teams are smaller, so basically one artist will take more roles in
Mm.
comparison to Western films. So, like when I was on The Illusionist, we had, animators who are allocated to characters. And then you get a layout artist, you also got assistants, and then you get in-betweeners,
Mm-hmm.
and you got effects animators. In Japan, the layout artist, the character artist, the effects artist, the assistant is one person.
Mm.
So we just do everything. We do the layouts. We even work out the camera move.
Mm.
Yeah, so one person is taking a lot more of a role in Japan for sure. So, like, in a way, it's more enjoyable because
Okay.
you have a larger part in the film in comparison to large Hollywood films where you really clearly feel you're only a tiny piece of the machine.
Okay.
But at the same time, Japan, the salary is not great. So you're
Mm.
miserable in that sense. Let's put it that way. Creatively, you're satisfied, but financially, you're not going to be rich. Let's put it that way.
Okay. And Animate Life writes, when supervising, what were the things you struggled with the most?
So when I was animation directing for a series, the biggest struggle was, first of all, we had our animation team in Canada, and I was animation directing from a production house in London. So that distance is always difficult,
Mm-hmm.
not being there in person. I did travel out there to meet the team, but obviously not being there in person, uh, it does make a huge difference, even with the digital age, and you're able to connect, via Skype like we are. It's difficult to yeah, it's still difficult to work without physically actually being there and being part of the team. Also, with supervising, it's not entirely creative. There's a lot of management involved, and also having to become a little bit of a detective on, especially when you're working with another company who is providing animation for you, when the work is not delivered to the standard that you expected it to be, you're having to sort of like nitpick at why is that, and those are the stuff that I
Mm-hmm.
just really just don't enjoy doing.
Okay.
I would just rather, stay on the creative side most of the times and leave the management side to somebody else. So yeah,
Mm-hmm.
those are the difficulties.
Okay. And let's see, what about Megan? Is actually a student of mine, and she writes,
Oh,
"What's
really?
your favorite thing to animate? Characters, environments. What's your favorite thing to animate?"
Um, I don't have a particular action that I like, but I do like to do sequences which deliver an emotion or an impact. So, if I'm, animating a scene which is just a character walking from A to B just to, make sure that the viewer isn't lost, then I'm a bit bored. But when it's a sequence that means something in the film. So recently I worked on a feature film called Birthday Wonderland. It's a Japanese film. And actually the producer let me choose which sequence I wanted. And I went for this one particular sequence, which is, in terms of movement, it's really dull. There's not much movement there, but it was a back and forth between these two characters. And it's a very emotional sequence, and it's actually a really pivotal point in the movie where everything changes from that moment. So I wanted to take this sequence on because it was a very significant sequence. So those are the sequences I like to animate. It's not anything like a movement or anything. It's always about, what emotion am I delivering here? That's kind of other sequences I like to do.
Okay. And let's see, do you have any advice for animation students? There we go.
Okay. So, yeah, that's a good way of putting it. So I get a lot of questions. So all I can do is share what I did and what worked for me. It's not going to work for everybody. My biggest advice actually would continue asking that question to animation professionals that you come across every time, and then you'll probably get a different answer every time. And take what works for you, because it just totally depends on the individual. So the way that I worked was when I was a student, I think any student can relate to this. Especially students who really are taking animation seriously. And I really was I was determined. I was ambitious. I was, driven. I wanted to get into the animation industry no matter what. There's no way that because I didn't have much knowledge about anything else, I couldn't imagine myself in any other profession anyway. So I was kind of desperate to get into the animation industry as soon as I finished school. So my tactic was to use my vacations. So especially summer break, because it's so long, you can do quite a lot. I would contact studios if they take me in for internships or an assistant or something. But most of the times these places didn't have, well, to be honest, 100% of them said no. But what I also did was I applied as a voluntary helper at film festivals and animation festivals. And one in particular that I did was the Hiroshima Animation Festival in Japan. And I was a volunteer worker there. And the reason why I did this was because I can speak English and Japanese. I'm a bilingual speaker. So I thought, well, that's going to make me more useful than other volunteer workers who are likely to be Japanese, right? So, and then I saw the guest list that year that I attended. It was kind of like the 10th anniversary, so they were going big with the guests. So the guests were Richard Williams, Sylvain Chomet, Michael Dudok-DeWitt, and Takahata. So these were four golden names in the animation industry. And I flew out there because I was studying in the UK. I flew out there and, I decided to work for this festival. I had to work for free, of course, but when you're a volunteer worker, there is some sort of financial aid. So I think they gave me a little bit of money for my accommodation and transport. And then they paid for all the food whilst I was there. I was a poor student, so that was, every little bit helped. And so I was, when I arrived there, when you get to meet all the other workers, volunteer workers, and as well as the festival runners, I introduced myself as I'm at university studying animation, and the workers there were very helpful. They said, well, this is a fantastic opportunity for you. So I was the actual personal interpreter for Dick Williams, Sylvain Chomet, and Michael Dudlowski.
Oh, great.
So I had my personal access to them there. And even though Takahata didn't need an interpreter, I was helping Takahata. I was his assistant during the festival.
Mhm.
So, and you know what? 10 years later, they all remembered me still doing that. So Sylvain Chomet obviously being one of them, I was studying at Bournemouth at this time, and he told me, oh, I'm actually making a feature film in the UK. You know, I'd be interested in seeing your portfolio. So then I said, well, I don't have a portfolio, but what do you want to see in the portfolio in order to work on The Illusionist? And Sylvain said, well, I want to see life drawing, strong life drawing. That's what will work for this film, because this is a realistic film. So pretty much the final year of university, as well as making that graduation film, I was going to life drawing like crazy. And my portfolio that I had to apply for The Illusionist was nothing but 10 pages of life drawing. And
Wow.
then Sylvain just took me in based on that and my test. So the job hunting aspect by creating connections happened way before I graduated, and setting up my portfolio was entirely based on a potential client. And that's, I think, what is important. And, you know, I shared all this information with my classmates at Bournemouth whilst I was studying. I told them all, look, Sylvain said to me, he wants to see strong life drawing in your portfolios. But to be honest, they all kind of went to Sylvain, because we all had the opportunity to show Sylvain Chomet our work, all of my classmates. And everybody had a variety of stuff in their portfolio, like character designs, background, look what I can do. And, you know, people had show reels, but there was me who just simply had 10 pages of life drawing because he told me he wanted to see life drawing. And Sylvain told me afterwards, saying he saw somebody who can listen to instructions. You know, and that was actually important to him, because of course he's going to be the director and I'm going to be working for him. So he saw that in me, but also, you know, when I did the test, he saw a very steady hand. He was saying, you know, your lines are clean. And that was all due to me doing a very meticulously accurate graduation film. So it all paid off in that way. You know, I started pretty early during my studies. So a lot of students say, how do I search for work after I graduate? I say, no, start searching for work before you graduate, because I secured my job on The Illusionist a year before I graduated. So, you know, that would be my advice. Again, it's not for everybody. This is what worked for me. A lot of people say, how do I continue working, especially in 2D animation, when there's not many projects in 2D? How do you continue working? Have you gained other skills and stuff like that? I was like, no, I haven't. Like, my skill from beginning until now, it's still hand drawn. It's just that when you can draw, you can do storyboards, you can do layout as well. It's all the same skill. It's just one drawing skill. But I say to people, ever since, let's say, I think ever since The Dreaming Machine, ever since my second job, I haven't applied for a job. The work has come to me. The reason being that I get recommended by friends.
Oh, that's great.
And I also recommend my friends, and that's how the industry works. And I find that studios are very reluctant to, or very hesitant to just openly recruit and take in whoever is just simply skilled. Of course, the skill is important, but the reason why I think, you know, I am able to work is just that I think I am capable of just listening to, you know, what my supervisors, directors say, and do what's required. because
Right.
it's not about showing off what you can do. It's about delivering the work that is required of you. Um, so yeah, I think that's kind of important. A lot of people are focused on you have to be the best artist in the world. That's not the case, because I am not. There are plenty of animators who are easily better than me, plenty of layout artists, story artists who are easily better than me, but that's not the point.
Right, right.
If everybody on a Tim Burton film has the personality of Tim Burton, or if everybody with the personality of Miyazaki was working for Miyazaki, it just wouldn't work. The reason why there are in positions they are is because they are, the exceptional genius. But not everybody is going to be that, and that's perfectly fine, because in order for a film to be made, it needs a team. It's a team effort, and so if you're thinking, getting into this industry is a one-man show of showing off how great you are, it's probably not where you want to be, because you really need to be a team player in this industry.
Right. And that's where, yeah, because there are a lot of times, I don't know. I mean, I've been in crunch time where you're working, weekends till like 2 in the morning sometimes on a project trying to get it done. And yeah, it's good to have people around you that are all, get along. You can count on this person to do this or that, and they can count on you. And yeah, I see that a lot where people will, the person that has a job at a studio gets sick or has to leave or whatever, and then there's someone there at the studio that kind of says, "Hey, I have a friend that could do this," and then that person comes in and they're tried out, and the next thing you know, they're working at the studio.
Yeah.
So yeah, I find it's real interesting, because now I tell my students, a lot of them are like, I want to be a 2D. I want to draw. I want to do this. I want to be like the 9 old men. I want to like smoke cigarettes and have a train in the backyard and things like. And I go, no, we live in a 3D world now, and unfortunately But the nice thing about 2D, if you learn it the way you have, you can apply all that stuff to the computer. It's just you have to learn like the buttons and what does what on the computer, which does take a lot more time to do.
I mean, this is a subject that I'm pretty sort of like strongly passionate about. People ask me, "Oh, what do you think about the death of 2D?" I was just like, "2D isn't dead. I'm working it. Like
right.
I'm literally, I am having to reject so many jobs because there's only one of me, basically, and that is inclusive. And that's not just me. That's my friends as well. There's so much 2D work. The reason people think 2D is dead is because you don't see it on the screen, but behind the scenes, 2D artists are still working. Like my recent job was Aladdin for Guy Ritchie. And there was an army of 2D people because we were employed to do 2D previs. So we were literally animating 2D characters on live action footage, to show what the film could potentially look like. So, I 2D is still very much kicking and alive, and still very, very is still going strong. So, just because you don't see it on screen, it doesn't mean it's not there. A lot of people say, "Oh, do you prefer 2D? Do you prefer 3D? Do you prefer live action?" I'm just like, why are you categorizing it that way? Like, why are you putting walls up between these things?
Right.
And people say, "Oh, but 2D is beautiful and 3D is ugly." I was just like, what? Like, have you not seen Spider-Man?
Oh,
the recent one? Look how amazing that was.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I'm just like, yeah, but is it really 3D, or is it 2D, or is it something else? Because it's a fusion of skills, and I don't see film at all as like, I don't need to sit down and watch a film and go, okay, so this movie is categorized as live action. Now I'm going to watch it. Or this is, I just don't care, what the label is. What's important is that, is this a good movie, in my opinion? So, it's not about, what the label is at all. Who cares about it? Because at the end of the day, in this day and age, it's a fantastic time for film and animation because there are no boundaries anymore. We are like, I am a 2D person who worked in live action, 3D feature film, stop motion film, as well as 2D films. They are categorized like that, but, I'm a 2D person in these films. And I just couldn't say that, for instance, I don't think Avatar is anything either. That's the amount of animation that's into that. I would almost say, well, it's kind of like an animated feature film. But now, in this day and age, I just don't think it matters anymore what category is. Yeah, it's just a fusion of skills all coming together, and taking the best of it, I think.
How do you feel about Disney taking all the classics that they've done and turning them into like what they're turning them into?
Yeah, the remakes.
Yeah.
I think, first of all, there's two sides of me. So my own personal so there's the professional side of me who thinks of it as work, and then there's also the side of me who thinks about it as a movie lover. And that's just my personal side. So professionally, I think it's fantastic because economically, that means a lot of work for us. These films involve thousands of people working on it, and we are, like I said, I was a 2D person working on one of these, and you have no idea, like the talent that are on these films are incredible, so in terms of financially, economically, it's fantastic for us artists. And anybody who says, oh, Disney shouldn't be doing that because it's ruining my childhood, I say, well, you know what? It's paying my rent. So, like, my opinion is, I don't care whether or not you think these movies are made. I'm really, really happy that these films exist, because it's my life. It really is my job, I think people have a harsher opinion and a more judgmental kind of way of phasing things when they're not at all involved, when their life doesn't depend on it. But this is a large part of my my career. So it's important that these films exist. For me, as a professional, I'm really, really happy that, they're getting the go-ahead. The nice thing is that they're nicely budgeted. They do allow for, the schedule is still tight, but still, in comparison to Japanese projects, is quite a luxury schedule, and is a luxury salary as well. They pay, the artists are paid well. So you have to give it to Disney for that, And at the end of the day, animation, a lot of people say, oh, but it should be more artistic this, artistic that. Animation is a lot of the times, commercial animation is a product to make money. And the animation industry is very much dependent on answering and fulfilling consumer demand. So, the whole niche film lover who loves, Wes Anderson and, Miyazaki, you are not the majority. The majority wants to see more and more of these Disney remakes because they're fantastic popcorn movies to go watch with your friends and family. So yeah, That's my opinion on them. My movie lover side,
Hmm.
I don't really pay attention to them. Let's put it that way.
Hmm.
I do. I only watched the Disney remake movies when I was offered a position on Aladdin, and I watched them as reference. But in reality, if that wasn't the case, I wouldn't. I just wouldn't even pay that much attention to them because, to me, they, But I'm a movie geek.
Hmm.
You know, I am an utter movie geek. My favorite director is Lee Park Chan Wook. He's a Korean director. He's a director of Old Boy and
Mm.
The Handmaid recently. These are the movies I enjoy watching. I don't even know. I don't even watch the Star Wars movies or the Marvel movies. It's not about do I like them or not. I just simply choose to watch what I want to watch. And
Right.
these films are the kind of films I choose to watch are not Disney remakes. But
Hmm.
yeah, that's
Okay.
my opinion.
Speaking of Marvel, Brian Lau, I think that's his name. He writes, "Would you work on a future Marvel movie?"
Um, uh, yeah, it's I wouldn't say no to. Actually, okay, so is Spider-Man Marvel?
Yes.
I was actually offered to work on Venom
Oh, okay.
some time ago. So and I had to reject it just simply because I was on Aladdin actually.
Hmm.
Yeah. It just completely depends on timing, you know. But if I weren't working on Aladdin and that was what was on offer, I probably would have taken it. As well as working in film full time, I do on the side a little bit of teaching. So I teach in the UK at several universities, and I travel quite a lot to teach at film festivals. I did a few in the US. So no, actually, I think I only did two in the US. So I did the New York Comic Con, and I also did an anime convention called Anime Next. And
Hmm.
so those were my past ones. And at the same time, I was asked to do talks at Blue Sky, Pixar, and all that as well. But yeah, so next coming master classes are both of them in Spain.
Hmm.
One coming up in Valencia for the Core Tunes Animation Festival, and that is April the 7th. That's my Core Tunes masterclass. And then I have one coming up at in May. I don't have specific dates yet, but I will also be doing a masterclass as well as a workshop. So those are two different things in Gran Canaria at the Animayo Animation Festival, Film and Animation Festival. So if there are any Spanish people listening, I will be there soon, or you might have an excuse to go to these lovely sunny places for an animation festival. So those are coming up.
Okay, great.
So I get a lot of messages via my social media saying, "Oh, could you come to Australia to do a talk for us? Can you come to so and so to do a talk for us?" I just like people to know I don't organize my talks myself. I get invited by schools or festivals. So the best way, if you want me to come and do a masterclass or workshop, the best way is to put in a recommendation and a request to your local film festivals or animation festivals, or if you're a student, to your own university if they allow for guest lecturers, because that's how it all happens. I'm not the person who goes in and organizes it and requests for me to visit there. It's
Right.
the other way around. Yeah, if you'd like me to come along, then please put in a request into your local festivals, and then they might be able to arrange something for you. So that's just one thing that I want to
Okay.
say.
Joseph Casey says, I found Aya after watching Wolf Children, new favorite movie. How was it to work on that movie and working on with
Hosoda. Yeah.
Yes, yes.
Hosoda, he's fantastic to work with. I'm still in touch with studio members there. I hope to do some work with them again, but the schedules never kind of match up. Always scheduling. But yeah, Hosoda is fantastic to work for. He's a guy who really, really has worked himself from the lowest of the low. I mean, this guy started just so, I really don't think anybody expected him to rise so much. And he's humble about it. He doesn't forget where he's come from. And that's fantastic because he's a superstar now in Japan. He's a celebrity. But, I remember, when Wolf Children came out, his fame exploded again. He was already well known in Japan. But when I left Japan, I had a small leaving due, and to my surprise, he made an appearance, and with a very big bunch of flowers, which was really I almost cried.
Aww.
And we were all shocked to see him there, saying, "Oh my God, but you're so busy, you've become international superstar now." And he's like, "Yeah, but I enjoy my time spending with my animators more than anybody."
Oh, that's great.
This is where I can be the real me. That was a real, and we all had a drink together, and he was so just so humble. So, and I still think I'm sure he's still the same as always. Lovely to work with.
Oh, that's nice. Yeah, I when you mentioned Richard Williams, I met him when he came to Portland to our studio, and
nice.
most of the people there didn't know 2D. They're all 3D or stop motion guys, and so I was taking him around, and he's like, "Hey, am I doing okay? Are they getting it?" And he gave his master class there, and it was so funny because he kept he drew on a dry erase marker. And first he drew it, do all these notes using a Sharpie. And, and then he went to erase it, and he was like, "Oh no! Oh dear! Oh no! It's not working." so then they rotated the thing over, and some guy was on the other side trying to wipe it off, and we're like, "You should sell that on eBay. That's going to be famous someday, So he wrote it in dry erase, but he had a tendency to wipe off, using his hand, and so he would do that, and he'd touch his eyes, and he'd kind of start, so then what you do, the passing position is here, and he'd do all this stuff, and then finally at the end of he's like, "Okay, we're gonna go to lunch now," and he had all this dry erase marker around his eyes, so he looked like a raccoon. He's like, "How's it going? Are they getting it?" And I'm like, "Well, yeah, you should go into the washroom there and wash that off, But it was really fun because it was a studio-wide kind of mandatory thing to go to, and all the animators were just in heaven. It was heaven and hell because the heaven was watching him, and he's going over his master class right there. You could ask questions, all that stuff. And then all the producers and PAs and people that aren't really, don't really deal with animation had to sit there. Back then they didn't really have cell phones, so they were all just kind of, "Oh, this is so boring. Who cares? Who cares how a guy walks and picks up a eraser? Why am I watching this?" So it was fun. We were all, animation-wise, we were just like, "This is great."
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. The dull things that animators sometimes we'd geek out about particular characters, the way their eyelashes moved in secondary animation, how amazing. And the average person would just find that going,
"Right.
What?"
Yeah, exactly. Also, could you give some advice on how to make a portfolio? How to decide to what to include and what not? That sounds pretty big. I don't know if you want to.
Yeah,
Short answer.
it's quite simple. Yeah,
Yeah.
first of all, I think people tend to have too large a portfolio, so keep it small and just keep it concentrated to like the absolute best of your work. Another thing is what I used to do is I would change and alter my portfolio depending on who I'm applying for,
That's great. Yeah.
because yeah, if you're applying for, if you've got a portfolio full of life drawing and you're applying for a company that makes car games,
Right.
then that's probably not the right person. Then for that studio, maybe do some sketches of vehicles so that you can prove that you can work as a story artist or conceptual artist there. So yeah, changing a portfolio depending on who you apply for is pretty useful as well. Also showing uh, academic skills more than look what artistically what I can do is always safe. uh, Showing something academic is a little bit more so, like, my life drawing is very boring to look at because it's all about sort of like key poses and I'm not doing anything fancy with it. But for Sylvan it worked because it was academic. It showed that I could draw the human figure.
Mm-hmm.
So, you know, showing what style you have can be quite dangerous sometimes because most of the time you're probably going to be on a project that already has a set style. So they'll be looking for somebody who can be molded into that style. However, if you don't show that you have one specific style, but a variety of ways, like your ability to adapt, if you can show that off, then that's a bonus as well. So yeah.
Oh, someone, John Joseph says, thanks for the interview. Thank you for sharing your knowledge and making awesome animation.
Brilliant. Thank you.
So yeah. What do you look for in an apprentice?
Okay, in an apprentice. Well, I'm not sure an apprentice. I'll be taking on an apprentice anytime. But usually, I work with a lot of assistants. Let's put it that way.
Oh, okay.
Assistants, and I usually work with the same assistants all the time. I go on a job and then there'll always be a crunch time and I'll just be like, well, if you want things to speed up, I can recommend assistants so that we can sort of like produce more work in a short period of time. So with my assistants, like just somebody who is able to pick up what I've done and just kind of mimic what is already there and get it to completion. Assistant animators are really, really crucial in animation. I think they are an absolutely neglected in terms of spotlight, which is a shame because a good assistant is absolutely compulsory. So yeah, somebody who's easy to work with, always, 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 and who is a team player. If they have questions, they can just come and ask me. Some people are so scared to ask questions.
Yeah.
And I could totally understand that because I used to be like that. But there is no such thing as a question, which is, you should be afraid of asking.
Right, exactly.
And I say to people, if anybody responds in such a sort of like venomous or horrible manner, you know that you don't want to work with this person in the future. And,
right.
Just be professional about it at that time. But you don't have to recommend this person as a professional to anybody.
This has been Aya Suzuki and the interview here and on the Ambassador Good Time Ear Tango Radio Hour, and also affiliated with the Animateducated on YouTube. And we also have animateeducated.blogspot.com where you can see Aya's work that I put up there. And you can go to her website too, which is ayasuzuki.blogspot.com. Hey, I did that pretty good.
Yeah, and then my Instagram is at Aya Suzuki 177. My Facebook is at Work of Aya, and I think my Twitter is at Aya_Suzuki. I should have unified them, but I didn't think about that.
Yeah, I just put it.
Them up.
All right, well, thanks again, and we'll see you next time on the Ambassador Good Time Ear Tango Radio Hour. Next Tuesday, March 26th at 2 p.m. with Mike Owens, the creator of Danger and Eggs from Amazon Prime. And he's also the winner of the Emmy Award from 2018 for Outstanding Directing in an Animated Program. So tune into that.